Get out of that pool right now. The HOA president's scream shattered the peaceful Saturday afternoon. My 5-year-old daughter froze, clutching her starfish floa tie. I thought Karen was just being her usual controlling self. I had no idea she had brought a gun to enforce pool toy regulations. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Yo. Get out of that pool right now. The angry voice cut through the peaceful Saturday afternoon like a knife. I looked up from my book to see Karen Martinez storming through the community pool gate, her face red with fury and her infamous clipboard clutched in her white-knuckled grip. My 5-year-old daughter Ava froze in the shallow end, her bright orange starfish floa tie bobbing around her small body. She looked confused and scared as this angry woman marched toward us like a hurricane. "What's wrong?" I asked, standing up from my lounge chair. But I already knew this wasn't going to end well. Karen was our neighborhood's most feared resident, the vice president of the homeowners association who made everyone's life miserable with her endless rules and complaints. That. Karen pointed her finger at Ava like she was pointing at a criminal. That unauthorized pool equipment. It's a violation of HOA Regulation 47B. Around us, other families started to notice the commotion. Children stopped playing, parents looked up from their conversations, and an uncomfortable silence began to spread across the pool area. "Karen, it's just a pool toy," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Ava is 5 years old and she's playing safely in the shallow end." "Just a pool toy?" Karen's voice got even louder. "This is a respectable community with standards. I will not tolerate people who think they can ignore our regulations." My friend Maria, who was sitting nearby, whispered urgently, "She's been doing this all summer. Last week she fined the Johnsons $200 because their pool towels were the wrong color." But I was focused on Ava, who had started to cry softly. My little girl didn't understand why this strange woman was screaming at her mother about her favorite toy. "There's no need to upset the children," I said firmly, moving toward the pool to comfort Ava. "We can discuss this calmly." "Calmly?" Karen let out a harsh laugh. "I've been watching you and your spoiled brat all summer. You think you're better than everyone else, don't you?" The word brat hit me like a physical blow. Several parents gasped and I felt my anger starting to build. "Don't you dare call my daughter names," I said, my voice getting stronger. "She has done absolutely nothing wrong. She's breaking the rules." Karen screamed, her face now bright red. "This pool is for decent families who respect authority, not for people like you." That's when I realized this wasn't just about a pool toy. This was about power, control, and Karen's need to dominate everyone around her. But I had no idea how far she was willing to go. By now, a crowd was forming around us. Other parents were pulling their children closer, sensing that something dangerous was happening. Everyone in our neighborhood knew Karen's reputation for terrorizing families over the smallest violations. "This is ridiculous," said Mr. Rodriguez, a father of 3 who lived on our street. "Leave the kid alone, Karen. She's not hurting anyone." Karen whipped around to face him. "Don't you dare tell me how to do my job. I am the vice president of this HOA, and I will maintain order in this community." "Your job." I stepped forward, my maternal instincts fully activated now. "Your job is to shoot children over pool toys?" "I haven't shot anyone," Karen snapped. "But maybe some people need to learn that actions have consequences." The word sent a chill down my spine. There was something in Karen's tone that was more threatening than usual. This wasn't just her typical power trip, this felt dangerous. "Come on, Ava," I said, starting to walk toward the pool. "We're leaving." "Oh no, you're not." Karen blocked my path, her clipboard held like a shield. "I'm not finished writing this violation report." "Get out of my way, Karen," I said firmly. "I'm taking my daughter home." That's when I saw it, the bulge in Karen's oversized purse. My blood ran cold as I realized what it might be. In all her years of harassing neighbors, Karen had never gone this far. But the wild look in her eyes told me that today was different. "Karen, let's discuss this calmly," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's no need to upset the children." "Calmly?" Karen laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I've been watching you and your spoiled brat all summer. You think you're better than everyone else, don't you?" The word brat hit me like a physical blow. I saw Ava's bottom lip start to tremble, and anger began to build in my chest. "Don't you dare call my daughter names," I said firmly. "She's done nothing wrong. She's breaking the rules." Karen screamed. "This is a respectable community for decent families, not for people like you who have no respect for authority." By now, a crowd had formed around us. Parents were pulling their children closer, sensing that something bad was about to happen. But none of us could have imagined what came next. I started walking toward the pool to get Ava out of the water, hoping to end this confrontation before it got worse. But Karen wasn't finished. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded. "I'm not done talking to you." "This conversation is over," I said firmly. "I'm taking my daughter and we're leaving." That's when everything changed forever. Karen reached into her large purse and pulled out something that made everyone freeze in terror, a small black handgun. Screams erupted around the pool as parents grabbed their children and tried to get away. "You think you can just walk away from me?" Karen shouted, waving the gun in the air. "I'm in charge here. I make the rules." "Karen, put that away," I yelled, my heart pounding as I rushed toward Ava. "There are children here." But Karen was beyond reason. Her face was twisted with rage, and her eyes had a frightening, wild look. "Your brat needs to learn a lesson," she screamed. The next few seconds happened in slow motion. I saw Karen raise the gun. I heard myself screaming, "No," as I dove toward Ava. Then came the deafening sound of the gunshot that would change our lives forever. Ava's scream of pain pierced the air as she clutched her stomach, blood seeping between her small fingers. She collapsed into the shallow water, turning it red around her. "Ava!" I cried, jumping into the pool and pulling my daughter into my arms. Her little body felt so fragile and weak. "Baby, stay with me. Mommy's here." Around us, chaos erupted. Parents were screaming, children were crying, and someone was shouting into their phone, calling 911. Karen stood frozen on the pool deck, still holding the smoking gun. She looked shocked, as if she couldn't believe what she had just done. She was breaking the rules," Karen mumbled, her voice barely audible. "She had to learn." "Put the gun down," shouted Mr. Rodriguez, a father of 3 who lived down the street. "Put it down now." The gun clattered to the concrete as Karen dropped it, her hands shaking. But she still had that defiant look in her eyes, as if she believed she was right. I held Ava close, trying to stop the bleeding with my hands. "Help is coming, sweetheart," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "You're going to be okay." Within minutes, sirens filled the air. Police cars and ambulances came racing into the parking lot. Paramedics rushed to where I was holding Ava in the shallow end of the pool. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately," one paramedic said, gently taking Ava from my arms and placing her on a stretcher. As they worked on my daughter, I watched the police surround Karen. "Hands behind your back," an officer commanded. "You're under arrest." "This is ridiculous," Karen protested as they put handcuffs on her. "I was just trying to maintain community standards." Even as they led her away, she was still complaining about rules and regulations. The crowd of parents and children watched in stunned silence as Karen was pushed into the back of a police car. The ride to the hospital was the longest journey of my life. Ava drifted in and out of consciousness, her small hand gripping mine weakly. "Mama, it hurts," she whispered. "I know, baby," I said, stroking her wet hair. "The doctors are going to make you feel better." My husband David met us at the hospital. His face was pale with shock when he saw Ava being wheeled into the emergency room. "What happened?" he asked, pulling me into his arms. "How could someone do this to a child?" I told him everything while we waited for news from the doctors. David's hands clenched into fists as I described Karen's attack. "She shot our little girl over a pool toy," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "Over a stupid pool toy?" While we waited at the hospital, news of the shooting spread quickly through our neighborhood and beyond. Within hours, the story was all over social media and local news. Maria arrived at the hospital with several other neighbors. They brought food, blankets, and most importantly, their support. "The whole neighborhood is talking about this," Maria said, her eyes red from crying. "People are furious. Karen has been terrorizing everyone for years, but this is beyond belief." Other neighbors shared their own stories about Karen's behavior. Mrs. Chin told us how Karen had threatened to have her family evicted because their garden gnomes were inappropriate decorations. Mr. Thompson described how Karen had called animal control on his elderly dog for barking once. "She reported me to the city because my son's wheelchair ramp didn't match the community aesthetic," said Mrs. Williams, her voice bitter. "My son is paralyzed and she wanted me to remove his only way into our house." Each story added fuel to the fire of community anger that was building against Karen. After what felt like forever, a surgeon finally came to speak with us. Dr. Sarah Martinez, no relation to Karen, looked tired but hopeful. "Ava is stable," she said. "The bullet missed her major organs, but it did damage her spleen. We've stopped the bleeding and we expect her to make a full recovery." However, she'll need several weeks to heal completely. Relief flooded through me, but it was mixed with rage. Ava would survive, but she would carry physical and emotional scars for the rest of her life. And for what? Because Karen didn't like her pool toy? Can we see her? David asked. She's sleeping now, but you can visit her in a few hours, the doctor said kindly. By the next morning, our story was national news. HOA official shoots child over pool toy was the headline on every major news website. Social media exploded with outrage and support for our family. Hashtag Justice for Ava became a trending topic on Twitter. People from all over the country were sharing their own stories about power-hungry HOA officials and demanding that Karen face serious consequences. Video footage of the shooting, taken by another parent at the pool, went viral. Millions of people watched Karen's angry rant and the moment she pulled out the gun. The public reaction was swift and furious. "This woman is a monster," wrote one person. "She shot a 5-year-old child over a pool toy. She belongs in prison for life. This is what happens when you give small-minded people too much power," posted another. "Karen represents everything wrong with HOA culture." The district attorney's office moved quickly to charge Karen with attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, and several other serious crimes. Her bail hearing was scheduled for the following week. Karen's lawyer, an expensive-looking man in a fancy suit, tried to make excuses for her behavior. He claimed she was overwhelmed by the stress of her HOA duties and had snapped under pressure. "My client is a respected member of the community who made a terrible mistake," he told reporters. "She's not a criminal, she's a victim of circumstance." This excuse made my blood boil. A victim? Karen had deliberately brought a gun to a community pool and shot my daughter. There was nothing accidental about it. The shooting sparked a community revolution. Led by Maria and several other neighbors, residents organized to fight back against the toxic HOA culture that had enabled Karen's behavior. Within days, they had collected over 1,000 signatures on a petition to dissolve the HOA entirely. People who had been quietly suffering under Karen's rules for years finally found their voices. "We're not going to let another Karen terrorize our community," Maria announced at a packed community meeting. "This ends now." The meeting was held in the elementary school gymnasium because so many people wanted to attend. Person after person stood up to share their stories about Karen's abuse of power. Mr. Peterson, an elderly veteran, told how Karen had threatened to fine him for displaying an American flag without proper HOA approval. Young mother Jessica Davis described how Karen had tried to ban her from using the playground because her toddler was too loud. Each story was met with angry murmurs from the crowd. People were realizing that they had allowed Karen to control their lives for far too long. Meanwhile, Ava was slowly getting better in the hospital. The physical healing was progressing well, but the emotional trauma was harder to address. She had nightmares about the angry lady, and was afraid to go near any pools or large groups of people. Child psychologists worked with her daily to help her process what had happened. "Why did the lady hurt me, Mommy?" Ava asked one day, her big green eyes filled with confusion. "I was just playing with Mr. Starfish. Some people have problems in their minds that make them do bad things," I explained gently. "It wasn't your fault, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong." "Will the angry lady come back?" she asked. "No, baby. She's been put in a place where she can't hurt anyone anymore." Karen's bail hearing was a media circus. The courthouse was surrounded by protesters holding signs saying, "No bail for child shooters," and "Justice for Ava." David and I sat in the front row of the packed courtroom, wearing t-shirts with Ava's picture and the words, "Ava's Army," a phrase that had become popular on social media. Karen looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was messy, and she wore an orange jail jumpsuit instead of her designer clothes. She kept her eyes down and wouldn't look at us. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Lisa Chin, presented a compelling case for why Karen should remain in jail. The defendant brought a loaded firearm to a public pool filled with children, she said. She then used that weapon to shoot a 5-year-old girl over a minor disagreement about pool toys. This was not a moment of passion, it was a calculated act of violence against a child. Karen's lawyer tried to argue that she wasn't a flight risk and had ties to the community, but Judge Williams wasn't having it. "Mrs. Martinez, you have shown a complete disregard for human life and public safety," the judge said sternly. "Bail is denied. You will remain in custody until trial." The courtroom erupted in cheers. Outside, the crowd was celebrating. For the first time since the shooting, I felt like justice might actually be possible. While Karen sat in jail, her life completely fell apart. Her employer, a local insurance company, immediately fired her. Her social media accounts were flooded with angry messages until she had to delete them entirely. Most painfully for someone like Karen, who cared so much about her reputation, her friends and family began to distance themselves from her. Her own sister gave an interview to a local news station. "I love Karen, but what she did was unforgivable," her sister said, tears in her eyes. "She shot a little girl. I can't defend that." Even Karen's husband filed for divorce, saying he could not remain married to someone capable of such violence. Karen's fall from respected community leader to isolated criminal was swift and complete. But it wasn't enough for me. I wanted her to understand the full impact of what she had done. I decided to give an interview to a national news program. I wanted the world to know who Ava really was, not just the victim, but a bright, loving little girl whose life had been changed forever by one woman's cruelty. "Ava loves dolphins," I told the interviewer, holding up one of her drawings from the hospital. "She wants to be a marine biologist when she grows up. She's brave, funny, and kind to everyone she meets. She didn't deserve what happened to her." The interview aired during prime time and was watched by millions of people. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in to help with Ava's medical bills. Toys and cards arrived from children all over the country. But most importantly, the interview put even more pressure on the legal system to ensure Karen faced serious consequences for her actions. Karen's trial began 2 months after the shooting. The courtroom was packed every day with supporters, media, and curious onlookers. The prosecution's case was rock solid. They had video evidence, dozens of witnesses, and medical records showing the extent of Ava's injuries. Karen's own words, recorded on multiple phones, showed her threatening and dehumanizing my daughter before the shooting. Karen's defense team tried several strategies. First, they claimed she was temporarily insane. When that didn't work, they tried to argue that the gun went off accidentally. Finally, they attempted to blame the shooting on her medications. None of it worked. The evidence was too clear, and Karen's history of aggressive behavior toward neighbors made it impossible to portray her as a victim. I testified about the impact the shooting had on our family. I described Ava's physical pain, her nightmares, and her fear of being around strangers. I talked about the medical bills, the therapy costs, and the way our sense of safety had been destroyed. "Karen Martinez didn't just shoot my daughter," I said, looking directly at the defendant. "She shot our entire family's peace of mind. She stole my child's innocence and sense of security. For what? Because she didn't like a pool toy?" For the first time during the trial, Karen looked up at me. I saw no remorse in her eyes, only anger and self-pity. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning with their verdict: guilty on all counts. Karen showed no emotion as the judge read each guilty verdict. Attempted murder in the first degree, guilty. Assault with a deadly weapon, guilty. Child endangerment, guilty. The list went on and on. The sentencing hearing was held a week later. The judge, who had clearly been affected by the case, was stern in his remarks. "Mrs. Martinez, you brought a loaded firearm to a community pool and shot a 5-year-old child over a trivial dispute," he said. "Your actions were inexcusable and have traumatized not just the victim and her family, but an entire community. You have shown no remorse for your actions and appear to believe you were justified in shooting a child." He sentenced Karen to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 20 years. As the bailiff led Karen away in handcuffs, she finally spoke. "This is all wrong," she muttered. She was breaking the rules. Someone had to maintain standards. Even facing decades in prison, Karen still believed she had been right to shoot my daughter. With Karen finally behind bars, our community began to heal. The HOA was officially dissolved and replaced with a volunteer neighborhood council focused on organizing positive activities rather than enforcing arbitrary rules. The community pool was renovated with donations from across the country. A new plaque by the entrance read, "Ava's Oasis, a place for all children to play safely." Most importantly, Ava was getting stronger every day. The physical scars were fading, and with continued therapy, she was learning to cope with the emotional trauma. 3 months after the shooting, Ava was finally ready to return to the pool. She wore her dolphin swimsuit and carried a new starfish floatie, a gift from the pool renovation committee. "Look, Mommy," she said, smiling as she stepped into the shallow end. "Mr. Starfish 2 is ready to swim." As I watched her play, surrounded by friends and neighbors who had stood by us through our darkest time, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that terrible day: hope. Our story sparked a national conversation about HOA power and the dangers of giving petty people authority over others. Dozens of states introduced legislation to limit HOA powers and require better oversight of community associations. The hashtag Justice for Ava movement evolved into a broader campaign for HOA reform. Maria became a spokesperson for the cause, traveling to speak at community meetings across the country. Karen Martinez was an extreme case, she would tell audiences, but she represents a larger problem. When we give people power without accountability, we create the conditions for abuse. I was proud that something positive was coming from our tragedy. Maybe other families wouldn't have to suffer because of power-hungry HOA officials. A year after the shooting, life had returned to a new normal. Ava was thriving in first grade, though she still saw a counselor to help with occasional anxiety. She had developed a fascination with criminal justice and often talked about becoming a police officer to catch bad guys like the angry lady. Karen's appeals were all denied, and she would spend at least the next 20 years in prison. According to news reports, she had become increasingly isolated, with no visitors and few friends even among the other inmates. I felt no satisfaction in her suffering. I was simply grateful that she could never hurt another child. David and I had grown closer through the ordeal, and our marriage was stronger than ever. We had learned not to take peaceful moments for granted and to cherish every day with our daughter. As for the community, it had been transformed. The fear and division that Karen had created were replaced by solidarity and mutual support. Neighbors who had barely spoken before became close friends. The annual block party, banned under Karen's HOA rules, became a huge celebration that brought everyone together. On a warm Saturday afternoon, exactly 2 years after the shooting, I sat by the pool watching Ava play with her friends. She was laughing and splashing, her joy infectious to everyone around her. A reporter had asked me recently if I could ever forgive Karen Martinez. I thought about it for a long time before answering. Forgiveness is something I might work toward for my own peace of mind, I said. But I will never forget what she did to my daughter. And I will never stop fighting to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else's child. Ava called out to me from the pool. "Mommy, watch this." She dove underwater with her new swimming skills, popping up a few seconds later with a huge grin. "That was amazing, sweetheart," I called back. As I watched her swim, I thought about how far we had all come. Karen had tried to break us, to steal our joy and our sense of community. But we had proven stronger than her hatred. We had turned tragedy into triumph, fear into courage, and division into unity. The pool that had once been the site of our worst nightmare had become a symbol of our resilience. Every time Ava laughed in that water, every time she played with confidence and joy, it was a victory over the forces of cruelty and control. Karen Martinez had lost everything, her freedom, her family, her reputation, and her future. But we had gained something precious, the knowledge that love and community are stronger than hatred and fear. As the sun set over Ava's oasis, I smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring another day of healing, another day of growth, and another day of the simple joy that no one could ever take away from us again. The water sparkled in the golden light, and my daughter's laughter rang out clear and strong, the most beautiful sound in the world.